Thank you for joining us today. My name is Joel Thacker, and I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana Department of Homeland Security. Today, we have gathered an expert panel to talk about a very important topic in the public safety community: behavioral health concerns for the first responder. IDHS and the State Fire Marshal deal primarily with firefighters and EMS personnel. So much of our conversation on this topic will relate to those stakeholders. However, trauma and mental health struggles are common throughout the entire spectrum of first responders. This is a group of individuals with higher rates of alcoholism and substance abuse, higher rates of suicide and depression, and increased risk of exposure to cancer-causing chemicals. The role of a first responder is an honorable one, although it comes with extreme sacrifice and exposure to very serious side effects that can be the difference between life and death. In this video series, we will work to identify the reality of today's firefighters and EMS workers and work toward a more open discussion of how society should be talking about the behavioral health of first responders. In the end, we want to talk openly about solutions, methods to help, and the dangers of keeping it all held inside. This is a series we're calling When the Smoke Clears. Welcome to our first episode of When the Smoke Clears. I'd like to thank the Plainfield Fire Territory for allowing us to use their fire station as a backdrop. And now let me introduce our panel of experts. Tony Murray, who is the president of the Professional Firefighters Union of Indiana. Steve Jones, Indiana State Fire Marshal. Dr. Bob Smith, retired firefighter and therapist who's been working with public safety personnel for many years. And Troy Clements, firefighter with Pike Township Fire Department. Our first segment is talking about the state of mental health in the firehouse. Now, I think a logical place to start in this discussion is to get some ideas from our panelists about the real state of mental health in the firehouse. Marshal Jones, how would you characterize the issue of mental health as it pertains to firefighters, not just in Indiana, but across the country? I know you've got 35 years of firefighting experience, but share your thoughts on things that you've seen in your time.
Yeah, we know that statistically, public safety has high risk of mental health. Suicide rates are higher than average of the regular population. So statistically and personally in Indiana, we see suicides and mental health challenges within the workforce. And I think we're talking about it, we're making it more known about the realities of the stresses that we face in Indiana as firefighters, EMTs.
Tony, is in your role as president of the union, you travel around the state. Can you share some of your experiences that you've seen with this issue of mental health?
Well, I think, first of all, thanks for hosting this program. I think it's great to get this group together. As I travel around the state and being involved in the fire service and EMS for a few decades now, one thing I've observed is that this is a shared issue. This is a shared concern. I think that has always been here among us, right? It's just until recently have we, I think, decided to talk about it. We do have challenges, and I think that as far as I can tell, because of programs like this, because of people willing to talk about the issue, we're making advancements in this issue. We're making advancements. We're touching the lives of our members and their families by having this conversation and structuring programs that I think we're going to talk about how to assist our members across the state.
Dr. Bob, you have a unique perspective. You've been a firefighter, so you understand that. Sometimes that's a challenge for clinicians because they actually haven't done it, but you actually have. And now in your role of helping others, what is kind of your experience?
Well, I think the fallout with this is huge. Suicide, anxiety, alcoholism and alcohol deaths long term. Many of our friends have succumbed to chronic illnesses like cancer, alcohol abuse, that are job related. We're battling relationship issues, PTSD, stress, burnout, and our retirees are also needing our assistance.
Yeah. And Troy, we're glad you're here. You certainly have a very important story to share with the group, and we'll touch on that through different segments of our program. But if you wouldn't mind, share your thoughts on the issue and your experience.
I have to say, first and foremost, thank you, at Plainfield, and to everyone here. Everyone on this panel is someone that I've known for a very long time, and I truly appreciate and thank you all for everything you've done for me. As far as mental health in the firehouse, it is definitely coming along. It is a lot better than it used to be. In the mid-90s when I started as a volunteer, even as a new career firefighter in the later 90s, that we really didn't talk about it. We didn't say anything. If you did say something about it, you were afraid you'd be put off to pasture, or the firefighters just wouldn't come back. So I know the word suicide's come up quite a bit. And I personally have had 4 brothers that I've worked with, and 3 that I became very close with that took their own lives. And tragically, that's brought the issue more to the forefront. But it has gotten a lot better since people are willing to see that you can talk about it and still come back to work.
I think you talked a little bit about it, but what is the reason why it's so difficult to talk about in the firehouse? Although it's getting better, there's still a stigma, there's still challenges. What do we think are some of the reasons why firefighters still aren't fully comfortable discussing this in the firehouse today?
I think that Troy hit on something, and you said the word, stigma. I think Troy hit on it. There's a variety of reasons, and one of it is, if you say anything about a concern that you might have, then people are going to think that you're weak and that you can't do this job, or that, I don't know, do I want to go, into an incident with this person? But I think we've come to the real realization, and if not, we really need to, that we're all human beings. Human beings aren't made to see and do the things that firefighters and EMS professionals do. It's just not supposed to happen that way. But we are wired a little bit differently. We take these jobs with the passion, I think, that's required to do it. But identifying it first identifying that there is a problem helps us solve the problem. And I think that stigma, I think we're trying to break that down to say, we're not meant to see these things. And by dealing with them professionally or, at the bay table, whatever that looks like or whatever the need requires, talking about it and actually addressing it isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength, and how you do that. And, maybe we'll talk a little more about, a diagnosis or of PTSD or other types of issues. All of these things are treatable. But if we're, I think, looking at from the scope and through the lens that these are real things, they don't weaken people, and they are treatable, and that we have to approach these things head on with prevention, and not necessarily prevention, but how you deal with things and how you sort through things. The other thing that I'll just say is, I think that we identify a broken bone or a flesh injury from this job. We just understand that's treatable, fixable, and you're coming back to work, right, after that heals. I think we need to look at behavioral health issues the same way as we look at physical health, and it really is all the same.
Yeah, I think, firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, we look at ourselves as being tough. And there's certain things in our career, because that we experience things that the normal population it affects us, and we don't like to show that maybe we've been affected. And so when we go home from a hard day at work, we don't want our kids to see that. We don't want our wives to feel that. And I think it's important to talk about it openly. And the stigma is we need our families, we need the fire service public safety to understand is we all respond differently, and we need to lean on each other so we can prevent some of the outcomes that we've seen.
You know, as leaders, you know, what conversations should we be having in the firehouse? Or, you know, as we're looking at development of company officers and even, you know, chief officers, what are these conversations we should be having?
I think personally, as a former company officer, I think they're the tip of the spear. I think if you have a lieutenant or a captain in a fire station that at dinner talks about this stuff, normalizes this stuff, I think that's a huge advantage. You know, our fire marshals behind it, our unions behind it, admins behind it. So there's really, I think that's the good thing we're seeing.
I think too, as new firemen, they don't know what to expect until they get out there, where your captain has some great experience to base on, that he can help train the younger firefighters that coming into it brand new, you don't know what to expect, and then it gets rough. And that's where the lieutenants, captains can help that process.
I'd say too, just like everybody else, just being open to talking about it. Just yesterday, I had the privilege to speak to a recruit class where not a single one of them had any fire experience whatsoever. I think there was one that was a former police officer, but he and I could relate after sharing a lot of the same experiences. And I told them, I said, you know, people look to us to solve problems, and we're very good at it. Our job is like the science of alternatives. And we fix things. And sometimes that when we find ourselves in our own little jam, that we're afraid to ask for that help. You know, like, I'm willing to ask you to help me lift up somebody. Why can't I ask you to help lift me up? You know, and so them seeing from, you know, towards the end of the recruit school, and we spent, you know, about an hour and a half talking, and that they, you know, can come and talk to anybody. Not a single person at our kitchen table is going to look down upon you and judge you for talking.
You know, Tony, I think, and sometimes maybe firefighters feel like they can't because maybe they're going to be in trouble, or there's, you know, some other type of consequence. You know, have you experienced firefighter as the fear from firefighters from that standpoint, and what would you share as, you know, representing the Professional Firefighters Union of Indiana? What would you share with those firefighters who are concerned with that?
Yeah, Joel, I think that we all know somebody and we can relate to these experiences, right? I think that sometimes we feel like, well, I don't want to get involved because I don't want to get that, you know, and maybe I see an issue. Characteristics have changed. How, you know, somebody that I've worked with for years is changing a little bit. I don't want to intervene. I don't want to ask too many questions. I might get him in trouble. But, you know, the reality is, if you don't express interest or don't show interest in saying, is there something going on? Then that's the thing that leads to trouble. That is where the trouble, that's the path to trouble. So really, it's sort of the opposite. I think that yeah, there is a fear of how much do I get involved? But as Dr. Bob said, I think this is all hands working event in our service. It's not one person, you know, depending on what badge you wear or how many years you have on. It's not just those people that have to deal with it. It's all of us that have to deal with it. It's, I think it's all of our responsibility. And I think to a large extent, and I think, Troy, you mentioned this, we have to look to those senior members too, to how are they reacting to situations? Are they open? Are they setting the example to say, yeah, you can talk about this. Maybe you talk about it, you know, taking a walk or going on a fishing trip or at the bay table or wherever, but talk about it. Maybe it is, you know, the discussion to say maybe you need to have some professional, you know, consultation. I think that all of those things need to be open, and I think that there's a culture there too that we're embracing, and I think in having open conversations that it's not about a chief's obligation to discipline. It's about a chief, a company officer, their union, their buddy that they work aside. it's all of our responsibility to say, first and foremost, what can we do to help you? That's the first and foremost thing.
I think just quickly, openness for folks to talk. Everybody's addressed that. I think we're doing better at making the fire station environment better at making this okay. So
I think it's mentoring. That mentoring word comes to mind is taking what you know and your experience and helping the next generation and teaching them to help somebody else. So,
and Troy, kind of specifically to your story, when did you reach a point where you knew things had kind of gone too far, and how did you finally find the courage to reach out?
December 6th of 2020. I remember it like it was yesterday. I remember it every day. That was the day that it all just bubbled over for me, and the world came crashing. And so there was a lot of guilt on my part, a lot of shame. Just feeling really defeated. When I ended up making that phone call, which was probably the hardest thing I ever had to do. That last number on the phone to hit was the hardest. It was hard. Was about 3 o'clock in the morning, some random stranger, I'm pouring my heart out. And, but that's when it all came crashing for me. And I tell you, once that I got some of it out, even though that person on the other end of the phone had no idea what I did as a firefighter, they were at least able to help me start the process of healing. And it's a long process. It goes over time. It just doesn't get, it's not like they wave a wand at you, but it's a process to get through it. And so that we can come back and be the dad, be the husband, be the firefighter and the caregiver, because there's a lot of people that love us. And that's through that process is where I really learned how many people truly love me.
Well, that's going to be the end of our first segment of our mental health discussion. Join us next time on When the Smoke Clears as we explore the progress we're making across all of Indiana in talking about mental health among first responders and the barriers that continue to impact that process. Until then, thank you for joining us. Stay healthy and safe.